Good morning. Welcome. Glad you're here today, and thank you for being a part of the Saturday Sampler. So when you can, pop in. Let us know you're there. There's a whole bunch of threads that I just noticed. I'm trying to get off my things. Hello. Greetings from Buena Park. Hi, Betty. And Lynn, welcome again. As always, good to see your guys' faces and truly honored and find it very special that you pop in each week and share this time with us. Try to keep it short and good. So, as always, please, if you have any questions or comments or helpful hints, whatever, please put them in the chat box. Appreciate that, as always. And so we've got Connecticut and Oregon, Washington. So we've got a few people from across the country. Hopefully those of you on the East Coast are not totally frozen in. I've been watching the news with that, and having lived in Michigan for a little while, I empathize with all that cold and all that snow. All right, today we're going to be doing cathedral window blocks, and my baby's window is what I think the windows in my baby's room is what it's called, and I think it would make a lovely blanket in a baby's room. But anyway, we're going to get started with that. I'm going to drop you down to my table, and I have one block completed of the four. The quilt is made up of four patches of these cathedral window blocks. So I have one done. I started a second one so that we could, see it to completion on camera today without taking a ton of time. And it's a fun block to make, but it's also a little bit on the tricky side with how she's having us put it together. There's other possibilities, but really they all come back to the same thing. So this is a wonderful way to do that. Some of it may be a little different than you're used to, but that's good to learn new things, because what I find for myself, and maybe you do too, and if you do, please put it in the chat box, is that each time I do something and I try a different way, and I'll read patterns, and I tend to change things up, put them in different places, things like that. But I also like to try a different method that I haven't seen before, so that I know if it's one that I want to adopt for myself. So keep that in mind as you read for that. And this one comes out really good. Now, I want to share one other thing with you before we get started. You may be able to recognize how it happens when we're working on this. If you are on page 23 in your pattern, if you are making this and got the pattern, it shows you, which side to put the light and the dark on. And because you're folding these, which you'll see in a minute, it's easy for me to spin them. And so if this was your block, she shows that you put the light to the left. It doesn't matter if it's the dark or the right. It's called consistency. And so to get the pinwheel, in your block, the dark or the light always needs to go down. Now I made the second one, and you can see that this is this half over here, and I put the light to the left. So now I have a dark to the left and a light to the left. And I was going to do them all the same way, and I had these all sewn together and put down before I noticed what I'd done. So What's your thoughts on that? Does it matter if the dark is down on one or to the left on one and the light is to the left on the other? Or would you go back and be one of those that redoes it? So anyway, I would love to know what you would do, because it gets difficult at times to know what to do and what not to do when you make a mistake. And I don't know that that's a mistake. I just feel that it is. All right, what you are going to need to do is, with the size of your squares, you're going to need to cut 2 darks and 2 lights, or at least very contrasting patterns of this. And then you're going to make half square triangles out of them, so that you would have 4 half square triangles. And you've got 4 background blocks to work with as well. And then to get this corner piece, if you look on the table again, this corner piece, you're going to do exactly the same thing. You're going to get 2 fabrics, same size square, whatever that square size is. We're going to make half square triangles out of it, and you'll end up with 4 of them, which would be make a smaller version of the cathedral window block here in the center of the quilt, or the big 4-patch block. So that's the components that you need. And here I've already started again, and it's mostly time that I'm working on this, so that your whole Saturday isn't taken up with this. But I have marked, for those of you who do not have a mat or another way to, I have the Sew Steady mat under my machine, so I don't necessarily need to mark. But I did, for the sake of the camera, I put a mark straight down the center of the, on the diagonal of the block. And this is the same thing you do for both the large block and the small block. And so I'm going to sew the other side, if I can find my cursor, on this. And it would probably help if I turned it the right way. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and sew 1/4 inch away from that center diagonal line. It says my thread's out, but I don't see that. Well, let me see if I can get through this. The other thing that I want to share with you here is that on my Sew Steady mat, I can put the point of my block right on the 1/4 inch. This is the center, 1/4 inch on either side, and I'm going to get that without necessarily. Seems to be sewing, so I'm not sure why it keeps stopping. But if you can bear with me for just a second, we'll see what's going on. And of course, I sewed all day yesterday without that never happening. But as you can see, it's sewing, so I'm not sure. Alright, so now what we're going to do is take our rotary cutter, and just like with any half square triangle, we're going to cut that in half. And now we have 2 half square triangles. And I'm going to press that to the dark side. With as least amount of, pushing the iron over. I always, try to secure the, the threads or sink them into the fabric. And then I run the side of my iron over that center to make sure it's going to be nice and flat and it's not going to have, bends in it or whatever you want to call that. The words are escaping. Now we have our two half square triangles. And I want to cut them down to the size that they need to be, whatever, size. And there's really, if you're sewing pretty correctly, there's not much in terms of trim that you really need to do. But I find that if you trim, that you're just going to get a better and a more accurate block in the end, and especially with something like this cathedral window. Move that off. Yeah, let's get the other one. So sometimes it's hard to find anything to trim. But those, 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, whatever you might be trimming off of there, makes a big difference when you're going and putting those blocks together, and especially in a pinwheel. That out of the way. Clean that up. All right. So now we have our two half square triangles. And this is where, for your half square triangles, you're putting right sides together. Now you're going to have your block laying like this, except you're now going to put them together, wrong sides together, and make them into that triangle and press them. I would definitely take my time at this point when you're pressing these triangles in half. And when it's not coming quite together for me that way, I want to go back before I get that permanent crease in there and really make sure that I get that down. So I'm going to do that again, folding it in half, lining up my seam lines and my points, and working at making sure that my points are coming together up here. And this is where it's most important, is at the point. As I made several of these blocks, one I didn't notice that I didn't quite have it there, and it ends up showing when you get to making the block. So I think it's just important to take the time if you want your points and everything to come out correctly. So now I have my two blocks. I have my background piece, and as I said, here's where we need to pay attention, because if I put this in the corner, and this block is going to go here, and so I want my light against my dark, and so I'm going to put that down this way so that I do have my light and my dark correct when I go to sew it together, and keep that consistent. I am also finding that the glue has worked really well for me in terms of keeping the fabric in place. And I put the glue down, I just run a little line across here, so it just keeps it right on the seam line. And because again, that's where for me it's really important to keep it correct. And then I will pop it with the iron just to get that you know, glue dried, and it's going to stay in place when I'm sewing it and moving it around. All right, so that's, you know, one completed there. And now I'm going to do the other one. And so this time, when we've got this up, this one goes this way. And so if I put my square in, I want my light and my dark up against the opposite. So now I know which way that I want this to happen. And you may say, well, I can do that without having to put that there. And wonderful, I wish I could, because I can't. Somehow I've got an issue with that. And so I have to put it there where I can see it. And I think it's because I'm a visual learner. And so for me, it helps to do that. But whatever works best for you. All right. So again, I'm going to, you know, dry that glue in place so that it stays put for me. And now I want to make my window. And what is suggested, which works pretty darn well, is I'm going to take this point and I'm going to put it on the 1/4 inch line, and I just want to make sure that this one is straight across, because if I get a crooked line there, it kind of messes with my visual. So I'm going to run this down like this, and then I'm going to turn it around and do exactly the same thing on the other side. Alright, so I'm going to make that nice and black so you can see it. Now, as we're sewing the cathedral window, what I'm going to do is I found that it works best if I bring my center down about 3/8 of an inch. And then this really, and I'm going to go and do this right on the ironing surface, makes it a little bit easier. And so then, because I want that to end a 1/4 inch, you know, the point that starts the curve, I want it to start right on that 1/4 inch mark so that that bulk is not in the seam line. And so now I'm simply going to press that really well. And I'm going to do that on the other side and just press it down and keeping my center centered. All right, so now I have that pressed. I don't have it pressed in my seam lines, and now I'm going to sew it. So let me check my because my machine is being funny, or it was, but everything looks good, so I'm not sure what the problem is, but we'll figure it out. We'll just keep going this way so I can show you how to sew this. All right, I have been starting kind of on the edge at an angle because I want to go 1/8 of an inch around this side. So I kind of start out here and I hit the point, and then I start with that 1/8 of an inch. And you know, some of them I do better. And I found that a stiletto on that very tiny start right there is very helpful to keep it where it needs to go. And so now I position my my foot, and then I can keep going at that 1/8 of an inch. So it's a little tricky at the beginning, and then I just work at it and go slowly. And because you do have quite a bit of bulk right there, it's good to keep that moving slowly. And again, here I'll get my and I'll sew that right off. All right. So now you have this sewed down 1/8 of an inch away, and when you hit that on this, I missed a little bit on this side. I may go back and correct it. It may correct itself when it's sewn in, so I'm not going to worry about that. I'm probably more frustrated with my machine at the moment than I am with that. So I've got that one completed. I want to go to see if there's any questions or comments. Okay, somebody said there's dust on the back on the thread reader. I don't see any, but I won't worry about that too much right now. Did you leave the bobbin door open? Nope, the bobbin door is closed. But thank you for these suggestions, because I'm not very, very good with how to maintenance my machine. That's a good suggestion, Alice. Making another one in the opposite direction. And, that's kind of where I was too. It doesn't matter. So I'm not seeing questions, but thank you for the help with the machine. I'm going to try some of those things as I go. I'm trying to see if there, dust, the doors, my door is closed, all of those things. So again, I am putting my I'm getting that 1/4 inch so I have a visual guide. And I want to sew these together so maybe I can make my machine work enough today for right now, so that I can get through this. And it's funny because I sewed most of the day yesterday and had no problems. All right, so again, I am putting this over about 3/8 of an inch, and truly I'm eyeballing it. And but I forgot to, I need to kind of do a little bit more glue here because it's not, and that when I iron this, because I used a friction pen, I'm going to have to go back and remark that. But for me it's worth it because it does move around a little bit and doesn't always stay put where I want it to stay put. So I want the visual. You may not need it. So again, about 3/8 inch down on the center, I just fold it in so that it goes to that end point. I press that down really well. Get the other side to do the same thing. Pressing it down. Alright, let's see how far I can get on this one before my machine keeps conking. Alright, again, I have you know, I'm coming in from the outside edge, and it doesn't matter because it's going to be in the seam line eventually. And right at the beginning, if I hold that, you know, piece down with my stiletto, I can get a pretty good well, I stepped wrong on that. All right. And again, you know, when it comes to the bulk for me, that's where I want to start to, you know, move slowly. All right. So now I've got my pieces here, and I want to make sure that I have them correct, and I do. But before I can do it, you know, sewing those together, I need to do something with this back side and the bulk that is here. So I'm simply going to cut to 1/4 of an inch the bottom 2 layers away from the seam line. So that takes that bulk out of there. And again, you know, I know that others have mentioned, you know, some of the, you know, waste and stuff, but I'm going to use those triangles in some other project, or along in this project. I'm going to sew them back together as half square triangles. All right, so I want to make sure that they're, you know, correct in there, and then we're going to sew these two together. And here's where you really want to make sure, first of all, that these two are, you know, lining up. And this went, that first one slipped on me a little bit with the machine, so I'm going to line it up here. And it's sticking off just a little bit, but it's not going to matter because that's in the seam line. So I'm not going to take that one particularly out this time around. I just want to make sure that at my 1/4 inch seam, the two come together so that I have a good, you know, that my block comes together and sits nicely. So pinning it together where I'm going to be sewing. All right, so let's see if I can get through this without too much issue. And you're going to see on this side that I have this pulled just a bit, and I'm going to readjust that so that I have those meeting, because that's where the, you know, and this is wanting to slip on this one. You know, I don't like to sew something that's a mistake, but today we're going to give it a shot. And now that I've secured that edge there, then I can go back and make sure that my seams match up and work, and especially, you know, that they're butting up against each other down here, which they are. So I've got my two, and as you can see with my fiddling that I still got those points to match, even though I had kind of gotten off at the beginning with that. So now I want to sew those seams open, or sew them. I want to press them open. That again just eliminates some of the bulk in the center. And then here again is where we want those points to come together. And so I start there. And the one way to do that is to put your needle through right where those points come together. Take it across and do the same thing where those points come together. And secure that. And pin it down. And then we're going to go back and we're going to do the pinning here and get, you know, that within, you know, that 1/4 inch seam range. So that is going to line up, and we can keep our, you know, our centers so that they're perfectly aligned. And this is where the glue has been really helpful than the pins. I did the first block with pins, and the second block I did with the glue, and the second block came out much nicer than the first one. So I do recommend that if you have it. I know people use glue stick, you know, the So Fine glue stick, pen, Quilter Select, any of those that have glue that will stick together will work nicely. So then it's simply sewing down that seam line. Because my machine is giving me a little bit of fits today, I'm not going to necessarily do that because I've shown you here how that block comes out. Now this one again, I only sewed half of that block together to make those half square triangles, and as you can see on this one, I sewed, I did, you know, sewing the curve for the cathedral window, and I cut away the back side, and I'll do the same thing here that I did on the center of these. And so when they're sewn together, as you can, you know, see, we're gonna hit that point together because I took the time with that. And the glue helps significantly, and because you want your points to come out as well, evenly on there. For me, it just really shows up a lot when you don't do that. Let me make sure, and Kristen has put up links to the heat erase pens, the friction heat erase pens, the Quilter Select fabric glue, which that one is really truly my favorite, because it sticks and stays put, but yet it's easy to remove. Can you sew the blocks together first, then do your cathedral window sewing? You could, but it would be far more difficult, because you are sewing, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're sewing right along here. And so if your block is sewn together, that could get a little tricky in there, because you can't fold that end so that it meets right there. It would, I think it would do something to the end part of that. You could certainly try. I mean, it's always worth trying things. But simply because you have the seam already in there, that top part of it is going to be folded over into the seam line. And I'm not sure how that would end up with the end point. But certainly try it, because the only thing you've got to lose is taking out one seam. So it's an interesting thought. Now you've got me curious, and I want to try that. So anyway, we've got one more block that we're going to be doing out of this book for quilt. And so I want to go back to, so you can kind of see the whole thing. So you have, this is what it looks like all together when you're working on that. Or if you want to see it this way, in the book, this is how the quilt comes out looking. And I chose to do each of my backgrounds different, and she has done all of the backgrounds the same, and I think that's a preference. And I think Lynn is correct on that. The backing fabric, cut the bulk out of your seam. That would be very difficult to do. And so thank you for making that point. I appreciate that, Sherry and Lynn, in that. But, because there is a lot of bulk, for sure, on that back side if you don't cut that away. All right, the last one that we're going to do is the packages, boxes, and bows. This one right here, we're going to talk a little bit about the ombre look. And there's a few techniques that you can try a little bit differently with this block, and then this will complete the quilts that we're going to do in this particular book. Okay, and I'm looking forward to that, and then we'll move on to a quick project, possibly a Christmas, last minute kind of thing for Christmas. But this will be next week. Packages, boxes, and bows. It seemed appropriate that was the last one, since we're coming into Christmas. All right. I hope that each one of you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and that you were able to share it with family and friends. And now, as you're approaching Christmas, that you'll be able to have peaceful days, not a lot of stress, and just enjoy your time and take a few minutes for yourself each day. So